Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to our third annual Best Games of the Year list. Now the way that I format this list is that I look at each game I played each month of the year and pick out my favorite. New this year, I'm also going to have a runner-up for each month just to have an excuse to talk a little bit more about the games that I've been loving this year. Now this list really only has one rule, and that it is a game that showed up on a previous year cannot show up again this year. I'll have a section at the end of the video where I will talk about some of my favorite games that are still consistently getting played that might have showed up on years previously. Other than that, there's really no rules or kind of logic. As long as I like the game, it doesn't matter what year it came out, it doesn't really matter what genre it is. It is just kind of a comprehensive list of my favorite games from each month of the year. So why don't we get this list underway and get started with January. Now kicking us off in January are going to be a bunch of games that were primarily gotten over like the holidays, over Christmas, and then finally starting to play them in the new year. And my favorite game from this month is The White Castle. Now this is from Devir and is a Euro game, and it is primarily dice worker placement, where you're going to be drafting these dice that are on this little bridge and then putting them out on different sections of the map to do different actions and trying to score points and such. Now, the reason I like this is that I like dice worker placement, I like dice drafting kind of as a mechanic, but this is such an extremely tight game. It's a very constrictive game. You only get a total of 9 dice placements, and so really making sure that you are getting the most efficient use out of those different dice is just, it's like a challenge. It's a very challenging game, I think, but it's a game that the more you play it, you start to see those different combos that you can start to build towards, and I find it's a really rewarding game to kind of learn more and more as you play it multiple times. That kind of brings up my biggest weakness for it, is that the first game of the White Castle can be extremely punishing. You don't really know like where to put these dice to like get the most out of it, and so if you kind of see the combos that you need to start placing and the other people don't, they'll like put a dice down, they'll get like one resource and that's their whole turn, and you're putting a dice down and you're like doing this cascading bunch of stuff. It can be really tough, but on repeated plays, you're able to really start to see that depth of the game. It really is a rewarding game to play. Now my runner-up for this month is going to be The Last Lighthouse. This is a Scott Alm Simply Solo game from Button Shy. It is going to be a tower defense game where you're going to be trying to protect this lighthouse from waves of attacking like Cthulhu, Lovecraftian monsters. Very cool kind of card placement, tower defense. I really enjoyed it. Now February is an important game because it is the game for me that kind of opened my eyes up to an entire genre of board games, and that is going to be the Plum Island Horror. Now this featured earlier this year on my favorite solo games of all time list, and that's really how much I have fallen in love with it. It is a war game, right? It is released by GMT. It's adapting this type of game called States of Siege, where you are trying to protect like an area of a map from like invading waves of forces. And I like it because it has this very pulpy, kind of like Tales from the Crypt, EC Comics, like creepy vibe to it. It's very like kind of cheesy and pulpy, and that really just for me kind of makes the minutia and intricacies of playing this kind of war game a lot more palatable. It has like funny events, it has like a good sense of humor about it, and I found like it was the perfect game for me, especially as someone who likes horror and solo games. It was the perfect game to kind of like on board to playing war games. We'll get to it later in April, but I ended up going to a war game convention in April, and that really has kind of started to open up the door into this genre for me, and really kind of has become maybe my biggest surprise of 2024. Is like, okay, I'm loving this cover. I really like zombies. I know like this is like very good designer in the solo space, so I kind of jumped on it, and it's really, really good. Plum Island Horror, if you kind of want to dip your toes into war games, if you like heavier solo games, I think it's definitely one worth checking out. And if you're enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing to join the channel. We do a lot of list videos and reviews and previews and playthroughs and all sorts of board game content, and I would love to have you on board. 2024 was an awesome year for the channel, and 2025 is shaping up to be even better. So get on board, I'd love to have you around, and let's get back to our best games of 2024. And now on the other side of the spectrum is a little card game that's pretty popular called No Thanks. Now in this game, you're trying to collect sets of cards, and you'll have these little chips that you can play into the middle pool if you don't want to take the card, trying to have the lowest amount of points possible. And so this kind of interesting little table dynamic that you get of trying to pass the card as many times as you can and choosing, okay, I want those chips because the chips are negative points at the end of the game. I want to take them. It's just such a nice casual game, nice conversational game. This has also been a strong year for the little go-to card games, and No Thanks is really great. I think there's a new edition coming out next year. I actually don't own a copy. I feel like this is one of those those games that I know people who own a lot of copies of it, and so I don't own it yet. So maybe that new edition, I'll jump on that. Now, my March pick is a game that I feel is pretty underrated and that I don't see talked about all that often, and this is a game also published by Devere, designed by Reiner Knizia, and this is Mille Fiori. Now, Mille Fiori is a drafting game through and through. It is almost purely mechanical drafting. It has beautiful little glass, they're not glass, they're plastic, but these glass-looking pieces that you're going to be putting around the city, trying to score points in different ways. Every card that you draft is going to allow you to play one of your pieces into a different section of the city that are all going to score in their own unique ways. This is very much kind of a point salad game where you're going to be going all over the map trying to capitalize on different chances to score a bunch of points. It is also a really high scoring game. This is like one of those games where you're scoring over 100 points, 200 points. Some games it's like you're like anemic. It's like, oh, I got 6 points. This is all I needed for victory. And then sometimes it's fun to play a game where it's like, I got 240 points and I did all this stuff in the class, and it's just kind of fun. And I love drafting as a mechanic, and I feel like this is just a lot of drafting games tend to be kind of smaller card games, and I like that this has a board, it has the nice glass looking components, and it's just a very nice game. I think there's an expansion coming out to this maybe in the next year or so I'm excited to see how they expand on this kind of system. But it's just a straightforward, basic drafting game. It's just a lot of fun, and I love placing these glass pieces out on the board. It's just become one of my go-to drafting games. Now, for the runner-up on this list, I have a 2-player game, and this is Air, Land, and Sea. I did get that in the right order. Air, Land, and Sea Critters at War, or just regular Air, Land, and Sea. They're just a re-theme. This is a phenomenal 2-player game where you are going to have 3 theaters of war, air, land, and sea, and you're going to be playing cards to each of those different theaters, trying to win 2 out of the 3 of them. And if you win 2 out of the 3 of them, you get a certain amount of points, and you keep playing multiple rounds until you get a certain amount of points, and you're the winner. Now, the really cool thing about this game is that you always have the option to retreat. And so it leads into these really cool mind games and kind of knowing what your opponent might have. Like, the deck in this game is very small, so it's very easy to have that knowledge of what your opponent has. And it's just a very nice dynamic, great 2-player game, Air, Land, and Sea. Definitely check it out. If you like kind of like 2-player, not like super confrontational, there is it's like war themed, but like it's a very chill, confrontational game. Air, Land, and Sea, I really enjoyed it. Now, April was one of the hardest month of the year. This is the month I went to Circle DC, which is a war game convention in Washington, DC, and I played so many great games there, and aside from the other games that I played throughout the month, and there was just so many hard options to pick from. And the one I'm going to go with is PAX Pamir 2nd Edition. I had a chance to learn it there from someone who was just so passionate about this game, and the way he taught it, the mechanics and the different cards and everything, it just was so inspirational. And actually, I didn't really enjoy my first play of it because there's so many different cards and so many different abilities. It is a game that you kind of have to know if you're playing with other people who know the game, because they are going to stomp you just from their game knowledge. But luckily, this is a game that is available on Boardgame Arena, surprisingly enough, and is one of those games that I've had the chance to dive a little deeper into, play it a lot more online, and I really, really enjoy it. I'm looking forward to the chance in the future to play it in person again, because I do really enjoy it, but I think it is a game that I think benefits a little bit from that personality around the table. I mean, most games do, but in a game that has this area control and this political veneer to it, I think it's a lot of fun to play it at a table with other people. Check it out on Board Game Arena if you haven't even heard of it before. I think it's worth at least learning. I think there's a lot of interesting things. Now, my runner-up is actually another area control game, kicking it back to 1995, and this is going to be El Grande. And if Mille Fiori was the most drafting of drafting games, El Grande is the most area control of area control games, where you're just going to be placing cards to able to put your little caballeros out into different areas of Spain and trying to have a majority in different sections at the end of the game. It just does a lot of simple but interesting things. It's a game that doesn't really bog itself down with a lot of different abilities and asymmetry. It is very clear-cut what your opponents can do, what you can do. But as someone who's sometimes hit or miss with area control, I found that how streamlined and clean this game was. And I realized there's a little bit of irony saying that after I love PAX Pamir, which is an area control game with tons of intricacy. This is on the other side of the spectrum with how straightforward and simple it is, but I really enjoyed both sides of that spectrum. So El Grande, my runner-up, and PAX Pamir 2nd Edition were my favorite games in April. Now, my May pick is a game that throughout this entire year has been slowly growing in the background of how much I liked it. It's a game that I started off a little lukewarm on, to be honest, But as I played it more and more, as I got more invested into it, it really kind of became one of my favorites of the year, and that is going to be Scythe, and specifically the Rise of Fenris, because this year I had the chance with a couple friends to play through the campaign of Rise of Fenris, all of its ups and downs, the first game that I got absolutely slaughtered on. Then this is like the most I've ever gone into like try-harding in a board game, where I went online, I went into like the Scythe forums, I tried learning the strategies for the different factions, their weaknesses. Like, I got so invested in playing Scythe well, and I actually did end up winning that campaign, but I felt like maybe I went a little too hard. But in any case, it was very fun to like get invested in a game, get invested in the strategy, really go deep into it. Because so often I feel like games are played kind of at a surface level. I'm guilty of it as well, where you just kind of play it a couple times, you kind of get a feel for the mechanics and some strategy, but you never play it enough times and with enough attention to really go deep into the game. And so playing Scythe through this campaign, seeing these factions grow, seeing things change, and really getting invested in your faction and the story. I think the campaign kind of helps draw out some of the theme that sometimes people want from Scythe but maybe don't get in the base game. I think it does a lot of great things. So Scythe, Rise of Fenris, I have a really soft spot for it, and now just Scythe in general I'm a big fan of, but specifically that campaign I think is phenomenal. Now my runner-up for May is going to be another button-shy game, and this is one that, honestly, over the year has really become a favorite of mine and have just kept going back to, and this is Mysticana. Now Mysticana is this really interesting modular card system that they made, where there's no like one game you could play with it. It's made up of a number of different modular games that you can play, and then expansions that kind of further grow and change the different things you can do with the Mysticana deck. And actually, I was just playing here, I have my Mysticana like right next to me, I was playing one of the new expansions that recently came out. Be on the lookout for a video on that soon. You can have an auction game, you can have a drafting game, you can have a trick-taking game, and just all this different stuff they can do with it is just really, really cool. I hope that they keep to grow the system. The fan community is off the charts for this game, where people are kind of making up their own Mysticana type games. And I think if you're trying to get into the wallet button-shy games, Mysticana has the base game has 3 different games you can play with it, and so I think it's just a nice flavoring of kind of what these 18 card games can do. So if you're looking to get into it, I think Mysticana is an awesome place to start. All right, so we are moving into the summer here in June, and my number 1 game from June is actually another Stonemaier game. I didn't realize it came right after Scythe, and this is going to be Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. And this is a game that I have just absolutely fallen in love with. Whenever I need a like 5 to 6 player game, I'm just always going to Libertalia. It's this really interesting game where you are building out this like crew of pirates and trying to get treasure on different days as you're going on this voyage. And at the start of that voyage, one player is going to draw a certain number of cards, and then every other player is going to draw the same exact cards. So at the start of a game of Libertalia, everyone has the same cards. And as you play these different cards out and their abilities and everything, there's a lot of interesting kind of table play that comes out where you know that a person has those cards, right? Because you have them. And I think what I really love about Libertalia is how easily it plays at high player counts. It is so hard to find kind of more strategic games that play well at high player counts. You're usually always stuck kind of with party games and that sort of thing. And so it's nice to have an option where you can play something that's a little more in depth, but not like super heavy, and you still have that option though, which I really, really like. It plays so smoothly, the turns are quick, there's good, interesting strategy to it. It creates interesting moments of drama with the different treasure that you can take, and it's just a really great game. Really my go-to when I want something that's a little more strategic, and I have a lot of people, Libertalia is my go-to. I really, really enjoy it. My runner-up, ironically, is actually another game that I think really excels at high player counts, and this is Vadis. This is the new edition that I had a chance to play this year, and truly, I was not sold on the kind of premise of it, right? Having a pure negotiation game where you are trying to get your kind of like group of zoo animals up into the top of the zoo and like become the leader of the zoo or whatever, that's built purely on negotiation. I just like, conceptually, I couldn't understand how this game would not just like brick itself and just be like miserable to play. And I was just really impressed by how they were able to take this like core negotiation mechanic and do so many interesting things with it, with these like asymmetric abilities. There's also these neutral factions on the map that are going to change the dynamic of how votes work for you to like move further up onto the map. And it was just a really neat game, one I really hope to play a little bit more. So Vadis, if you like negotiation, or maybe you're like me and you're like a little lukewarm on negotiation, I think it's worth checking out. I think it does a lot of interesting stuff. So July was another really strong month, but I'm gonna have to give it to the game that honestly kind of changed the way that I view of how board games are able to tell a narrative story, and that is going to be Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril. This game just has such an awesome narrative. The characterization of the different people in the story and how they contribute and how those decisions come up are really interesting. The core combat mechanic is really, really fun. So it kind of doesn't abandon one for the other. It feels like it has that strong narrative, but I feel like it also has that solid mechanical backbone that makes it fun to actually play round to round. And I'm so excited to dive more into Sleeping Gods. I have Distant Skies, but maybe the original Sleeping Gods eventually I'd like to check out. And really more of what Ryan Lockett is doing. I think that I've kind of been sleeping on the Red Raven games as a whole, so I would like to get more into them because they do have this like beautiful marriage of world building and storytelling with strong mechanics as well. So really impressed by it. Love Sleeping Gods Primeval Peril. Now the runner-up for July is going to be the game that I think I have played the most with my wife, and that is going to be Three Sisters. Now this is a roll and write game that's a little bit on the heavier side of that spectrum, where you're going to have 2 sheets of paper and you're going to be growing crops, growing flowers, managing your shed equipment, doing a bunch of different stuff in your backyard, trying to score points. It is a roll and write at its heart, but it also has this cool action rondelle. So you're going to roll the dice and they're going to go out on this action wheel, and depending on which dice you take, you're able to activate different areas on your map, as well as take a bonus action depending on which area of the rondelle that it was on. And so it creates this really interesting dynamic of drafting this dice from the middle of the table and kind of trying to see what you can specialize the most in. This game has so many fascinating paths depending on what you want to specialize in, what areas of your garden you want to really focus on, or do you want to kind of spread yourself out. A lot of tactical decisions depending on where the dice kind of end up on this rondelle so that you're able to get the most out of those bonus actions, and just a really, really phenomenal roll and write. We have really been enjoying it this year. That is Three Sisters. I think this is getting an expansion like next year, maybe the year after. I thought I heard something about that, and I'm really excited to see how they're able to kind of expand the Three Sisters formula. I do feel like it's like just right at the moment, so I hope that it doesn't get too bloated, but it could be cool to maybe add another like section of the garden to give you even more options. I'm curious to see what they're going to do there to expand it. Now, August was like the most phenomenal month for solo gaming for me. This is mostly because I was also preparing for my top 10 solo game list, so I was playing a lot of games trying to like get prepared and like really get thoughts on a bunch of games. But I was playing Kinfire Delve for the first time. I played Dyson Crusoe. I was playing Resist, like a lot of like phenomenal solo games in this month. But the game that I'm gonna end up going with as my favorite for August is Kinfire Delve. It is such a good card-driven dungeon crawler. Now in Kinfire Delve, you're going to be playing as a character with its own deck of cards, and you're going to be using your deck of cards to play actions to these different obstacles and enemies, rolling dice and trying to defeat them, getting to the bottom of the dungeon. Now the way that you progress through this dungeon is probably my favorite part of the game, where every time you defeat a challenge, you're able to delve deeper into the dungeon, and to do that, you discard cards off the top of the deck. And it creates this really cool illusion where you feel like you're going deeper by like depleting the deck more and more, and it feels like you're getting to the bottom. It is such a cool sense of progression. And then once you finally get to the bottom of the dungeon, you're able to fight the final boss, and if you can overcome that, then it's a win for the game. This is just such a fun and smooth game, just playing cards to do those challenges and rolling dice. That's really what you're primarily doing, but the way that these different obstacles can play off of each other is really cool. This is a game that you can two-hand solo really easily. It's like a very low overhead game, and the way that these different characters interact with each other and kind of help each other is really fun. The different modular sets that you can use like any of the characters in any of the 3 sets. You can mix it with any of the bosses. So it's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with these different sets. Eventually, I'm going to do a more in-depth video on Kinfire Delve and maybe like rank the different sets and kind of give my thoughts on each of them. But this is a game that has really kept growing in how much I've enjoyed it over the past couple months. And the more sets I add to it, the more modularity it has. I have really, really fallen in love with it. I might have a thing for solo games with modular sets. I do want to shout out Dyson Crusoe and Resist because those are 2 games that could have switched places with Kinfire Delve. Both phenomenal games. Dyson Crusoe I have a full review of if you want to check that out. And Resist might get its own revenge later on in the year. You'll have to wait and find out. And now my runner-up for this month is going to be Hamster Roll. Now this is a game from 25th Century brought over from Europe, and it is such a goofy dexterity game. It is a game where you're going to have this really goofy but really fun-looking wheel, and you're going to take turns putting these different blocks on the wheel and trying to get rid of all your pieces. Any that you knock off are going to be added into your pool. It's a dexterity game. It's a silly game. It has such an awesome presence. It has so many funny moments. I don't know what like weird geometry and physics happens on this wheel sometimes, where you can get some really fun moments where you're able to get a piece where you just didn't think that one should be able to go to. And I was kind of searching for a good dexterity game for a while, and I feel like I found it on Hamster Roll. It is just a ton of fun. It has great presence. And if you're looking for a dexterity game that's a little bit out there, I think it's definitely worth checking out. And it's been consistently fun as we've had it. Now for September is going to be a game that probably has the most amount of plays despite it getting kind of played so late in the year, and that is going to be Flip 7. This really straightforward push your luck game where you are revealing cards from the top of a deck, trying not to reveal duplicates, and trying to reveal 7 different numbers. It has a couple of cool ability cards in it. It is obscenely simple to play. It is super addicting. It is like a game that if anyone has even heard of blackjack, they can grasp their head of what's going on in this game. It is the perfect family party game if you're bringing it over for like Christmas or Thanksgiving or like a party or something. It is, on its box, it says it is the greatest card game of all time, and while I may still dispute that claim, it is a really, really phenomenal one. So versatile, so much fun. If you like Push Your Luck, if you're ever looking for like a light little card game, Flip 7's awesome. And now my runner-up for this month is another game that I've been playing a lot over this year, and this is Blood Bowl. Now, this is not the type of game I would normally be super into. I'm not really into Warhammer or like miniature games, but Blood Bowl, this kind of like true game of fantasy football where you have these wacky teams going up against each other. My local game store ran a league for it that I was a part of. I didn't do too well. I got knocked around, my poor Lizard Man team. But you know, painting the team, giving them names, giving them levels up as they go throughout the season was a lot of fun. I feel like this is a game that I still have to play a little bit more of to like really wrap my head around. There's a lot of like intricacies to how these different teams interact with each other and abilities. There's a lot of edge cases. But I think what really surprised me is that despite it being from Games Workshop, being a miniatures game, at its heart, I feel like it's more of a board game than anything else. And I've enjoyed my time with Blood Bowl. I'm looking forward to my second season. Now for spooky season, there are a ton of good solo games played this month, but I did say that Resist was going to get its revenge, and that is because its sequel game, Witchcraft, is going to be my #1 game for October. This is just a phenomenal solo game where you are going to be drafting a coven of witches at the start of the game, and you're going to be trying to convince these different jurors that you are a force of good for the town and trying to exonerate your name. And you're going to be doing that by resolving these different scenarios that are going to be put in front of you. There's 3 on the board, and you're going to play your witches to these different scenarios to try to overcome them. And you're going to have these different challenge cards that are going to come out. They're going to be like these weird creatures. It has like a very macabre art style to it. It's very eerie, very creepy, and I just absolutely love it. And it is just a great, great solo game. I think if you're into the kind of spooky theme, go with Witchcraft. If you like more of a historical kind of like World War theme, then go with Resist, but I think both are phenomenal. I think for my personal taste, Witchcraft edges it out a little bit, and it's still getting played well outside of spooky season. I do enjoy Witchcraft quite a bit. So my runner-up for October is going to be a party game that was an impulse buy from Walmart clearance section for like a couple bucks. And this is Green Team Wins. And I'm really surprised by how much I have really come to enjoy this game. It is very much a group mentality game where a question is going to be asked to all the players. You're going to write your answer on your whiteboard, and then whatever the majority answer is going to be the green team. So everyone who put that answer joins the green team, and they're going to score points. And your goal of the game is to stay on the green team as long as possible so you can keep scoring more and more points. This game reminds me a lot of the match game, and the way we play it is that we do like to kind of do it where everyone will kind of reveal their answer one at a time and like, oh, okay, a little blurb of why you put that, and it adds a little bit more to that kind of like camaraderie of why people are putting things, and I think that adds another layer to the game. I think this is very group dependent. If you play a game and everyone just like writes down their answer and just shows it and like, okay, green team, check, 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 check. I think that could be a little boring, but if you kind of play into it, if you play a little bit more like a classic game of match game, add a little bit of humor into it, I think that adds a lot to it. There's this really cool expansion that adds holiday questions specifically that we got a lot of mileage out over Christmas and New Year's. That was a lot of fun. We'll probably just leave it in there and just leave the holiday questions year round. But really great party game. I think my favorite that I played this year. So Green Team Wins. very awesome. I think it's going to be sticking around for a while. Now, November was another stacked month, but my favorite game for this month is going to be Scythe. Now, Scythe is a game that has become very popular after winning Game of the Year, the Spiel des Jahres, and I think has gotten a lot of buzz over the last couple of months, and I finally had a chance to play it in November. So mechanically, it is rolling dice and then placing them on different areas of this plane to try to land it. Now, at a mechanical level, I love dice placement. I think this has come up a couple times in the list already, but rolling dice and having to make those tactical decisions of where you want to put them is just really, really interesting to me. I love that mechanic in games. And so to put it into this cooperative setting was really fascinating to me, where one person is going to be the pilot and the other the co-pilot, and they're going to have these different areas of the plane that they have to play their dice to in order to land it and fulfill different conditions. Now, there is a catch where there's a little bit of limited communication where you can talk in between rounds, but once you roll the dice, you can't communicate. So you got to trust your partner a little bit to put the dice in these different areas in order to successfully land the plane. But for me, what really gets it to soar to very high heights is the amount of modularity that they pack in this box. Now, in addition to the rules, there's this little, like they call it like the flight log, and that's going to have these different scenarios that you can set the game up for. Like the first scenario is just like a basic game with nothing added, but there are so many little different airports and different scenarios. You can have fuel for the plane, you can have bad weather, and that is where I think the game truly shines. When you start to add these different little layers of complexity, it becomes a really, really difficult and challenging game, but I think it threads the needle so perfectly of being accessible and not super difficult, while also giving you a good challenge. It has a lot of funny moments where sometimes we'll do something so stupid, and it's like, why did you just turn the plane like 70 degrees in the wrong direction? All the people are throwing up on board, and we just have so much fun playing this game, and we have just played it a ton on the tail end of the year here, and I'm looking forward. We haven't even played through all the modules yet. We're kind of in a golden era of two-player games, and Scythe is certainly leading the charge on that. Now, my runner-up for this month is going to be another game that has gotten a lot of buzz this year, and that is going to be Harmonies. This is kind of a tile drafting and kind of pattern building game that has a very nice, beautiful kind of aesthetic to it. It has these like cool animals. Now, what I really liked about Harmonies is the kind of verticality that the game has. I find myself really being drawn to games that kind of have 3D elements and aren't just like flat on a board. They kind of have some cool depth and contrast to it. And Harmony does that really well, where you can stack these different tiles on top of each other, and depending on what like resource they are, they will be different things. So if you put like a wood one and then grass on top of it, it makes a tree, and the tree might be something that you need to fulfill for certain pattern cards for different animals. I think having the game kind of go into that third dimension and being able to stack different tiles, it does make it a little bit more difficult because there's really no going back once you plop something on top of something else. If you kind of screw yourself over there, you're going to be in a tough spot. But I think it adds a lot of cool strategies to the game, and that's kind of what my standout feature for it is. I think the pattern building is pretty straightforward, but that actual placement of those different tiles is really what makes it stand out to me. All right, now entering the final month of the year, the PAX month, a lot of games, but my winner is going to be a game that I did not expect to like as much as I ended up liking it, and that is going to be Cthulu Death May Die. Similar to some other games on this list, it is very modular, where you're going to pick a boss and you're going to pick an episode that's going to be like the map of the location, and then you mush those together, and that's going to give your scenario that you're going to play with. I think that mechanically it is actually way stronger than I thought it was going to be. I knew it was a lot of dice rolling. I was kind of expecting it to be kind of like stupid, and it is stupid to an extent, but I think that the like stuff going on underneath the surface is really good. Now, my standout thing for this game is that the way that you take damage in this game, like sanity damage, is on this big track on the top of your player board. And every time you hit a certain threshold of the amount of damage you've taken, you're able to level up your character. And I absolutely love that dynamic of the more damage you take, the stronger your character gets. And so you start off weaker, and things get more and more desperate as the game goes on, but you're also rolling more dice, you're using more strong abilities. I'm also a big fan of emergent narrative, and this is a game that does it phenomenally. The different event cards that can come up on these different maps really feed into each other. The drama of rolling a whole bunch of dice, of someone dying on the very last turn before the like old one is able to Be Defeated. It just has so many cool moments. I'm having a lot of fun painting it. I'm a big fan of the kind of Lovecraftian Cthulhu monsters. I'm already in the tank for that, and I've really been enjoying it. I'll probably eventually kind of dip my toes into more of it, but this core box, I've been having a lot of fun playing through it. Now my runner-up is another 2-player game, and this is going to be React: The Arts of War. Now this is a game I demoed way back in 2023 at PAX, and then this year I had the opportunity to play it again, and I was given a review copy of it, so I've been playing it way more over the past month. But this is a game that is just drenched in asymmetry and a lot of like intricate back and forth between the characters that you're using. So I have not had a chance to play through all the characters. The ones that I have played with, I have really enjoyed. From a 1v1 like combat game, it does so many interesting things. It is such a lean game where every character only has 4 ability cards, but I like, sometimes you want to play a very like difficult, crunchy 1v1 game, and I feel like React does that really well. And the kind of like anime art style that is just beautiful, and it's not like too fan service. It doesn't do any like weird anime stuff. It just kind of looks cool. But React is just a 2-player game I have been falling in love with, and I look forward to playing it more this year and really exploring some of those characters in more depth. Definitely a game where I'll have a more in-depth kind of thoughts and review video when I have a chance to kind of like really dig into them a little bit more. And so that brings us to the end of our 2024 games. I do want to shout out a couple of games that have been getting consistent play throughout the year that maybe didn't make the list or maybe showed up on previous lists that I am still enjoying. Got to give a shout out to Final Girl. We're going to have Series 3 soon. Be on the lookout, a lot of Final Girl content coming to the channel soon. Arkham Horror, the living card game, still getting campaigns of that played consistently. I want to give a shout out to Raw, that was on last year's list. Such a phenomenal auction game. Under Falling Skies, I actually don't know if this was on our list at any point, but another great solo game, very high on my favorite solo games of all time. I played through another campaign of that this year. Another little card game that has been getting a whole bunch of play is Biblios. I recently got the Biblios Roll and Write game, Quill and Parchment, and I'm excited to do a little bit of a comparison video. I know Biblios isn't available anymore, so I always feel bad hyping it up and talking about it when you can't really get it. There's a replacement that we don't talk about, and I want to see if the Roll and Write is able to give those Biblios vibes with a game that you can actually still buy and isn't out of print. On the 2-player front, I am still getting a lot of Unmatched played. I've added a couple of more sets over the years. Still playing a lot of Tales to Amaze, still a consistent game, just such a phenomenal 2-player game, such fun asymmetry with different characters. And also on the 2-player front, I guess technically it could be up to 4 players, but we are still playing a bunch of Mind Management throughout the year. And so there we have it, the end of our 3rd annual 2024 favorite games list, the extra large edition, where we have our runner-up category added. And I'm glad I did that. I feel like every year it always takes me a long time to like figure out which one I want to highlight. And hopefully this didn't feel bloated. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about some of the other games that I've been enjoying throughout the year. I like doing this very free format video where like it's not constrained to like new games or old games or whatever. It's just games that I like, and this is what I want to talk about. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I have a lot of fun doing it every year. It's hard to believe that this is the 3rd time I am doing it. And if you've been here since the 2022 edition, thank you for sticking around the channel, and a lot of good stuff coming in 2025. I'm excited for the future of this channel. We went to our first convention as a content creator this year, which was pretty awesome. And I think we're gonna have a lot of good stuff coming up in 2025. So thank you all. If you have been around the channel, if you're a new viewer, thank you. I hope you have had a great start to your year, and I hope you join the channel in 2025. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.